Karl Reinecke was born in 1824 and became one of the most influential musicians and teachers in Germany during the second half of the 19th century. He was the conductor of the famous Gewandhaus Orchestra in Leipzig and had hundreds of students at the famous conservatory founded by Mendelssohn in 1843. When Beethoven died in 1827, Reinecke was, of course, only 3 years old, but still, he's the only pianist born during Beethoven's lifetime who made any recordings at all. In the 19th century, Beethoven's music, and especially so his piano sonatas, were at the focal point of almost every discussion on musical interpretation. Reinecke himself contributed to this sometimes fierce dispute about how to perform Beethoven in many ways. He edited Beethoven's piano sonatas for the first complete edition of his works, and therefore studied the manuscript, sketches, and first editions carefully. As a help for his students at the conservatory in Leipzig, he also published a practical edition with his fingerings. Most importantly, however, he wrote a much-acclaimed book on the performance of Beethoven's piano sonatas, in which he uses the piano sonatas in the order of their increasing difficulty as examples to discuss every matter of musical interpretation that he deemed necessary for professional pianists. Reinecke strongly advocated against the changes in performance style introduced by Liszt and Wagner in the 19th century and claimed for himself to have stayed faithful to the tradition of Mendelssohn and Schumann. Although his skills as a pianist and his sublime musicianship were undisputed, he was therefore labeled a conservative by some of his opponents. But what better reason could there be to look at his performance of Beethoven's music, if it might very well convey to us performance traditions rooted deeply in the first half of the 19th century? However, the recordings that Reinecke made are not acoustic recordings on gramophone discs or phonograph cylinders. Instead, Reinecke recorded quite a substantial number of pieces onto piano rolls, perforated rolls of paper, which control an automated self-playing piano. The first of these so-called reproducing pianos was introduced in 1905 by the German company Welte and named the Welte-Mignon. It was an absolute technological marvel and able to reproduce the playing of pianists in such a faithful manner that many pianists preferred making piano rolls over recording acoustic discs. Reinecke's Welte recordings are therefore one of the greatest treasures of early recordings. Unfortunately, Reinecke's only Beethoven recording is not a Welte-Mignon roll. It was recorded for the German Hupfeld company, which sold the majority of their rolls for foot-pedal player pianos similar to the American pianola. These player piano rolls contain no information on the dynamics, because the dynamic expression was supposed to be added through the performance of a skilled pianola player. So basically, this roll only contains half of Reinecke's interpretation: his rhythm, tempo variations, and rubato. But without the other half, his accentuation, dynamic nuances, and subtle colors in tone, the roll gives a distorted picture of his playing. Just listen to how strange his interpretation would sound if all the notes on the roll are just being played with exactly the same loudness. Still, there is a lot to be learned from the roll recording, and Reinecke's interpretation is highly fascinating. I studied this recording very closely, with the aim of understanding not only what Reinecke is doing, but also why. Here, of course, the instructions in his book were of great help. But even more revealing was it to learn to play this piece myself, starting with using his fingerings from his edition, and then step by step incorporating more and more aspects of his interpretation into my own performance. The more I became acquainted with his style in general and his interpretation of the Beethoven movements in particular, the more I felt motivated to try to reconstruct the missing parts of his interpretation, especially the dynamics, through my own playing. Of course, without an acoustic recording, there is no way of really knowing how Reinecke's playing sounded. And I would be foolish to claim that my own playing sounds exactly like Reinecke's when he recorded the piece in 1906. The only thing I can attempt is an educated guess, a rendition of the piece that tries to be as close as possible to those parts of Reinecke's playing which was preserved faithfully on the roll, and at the same time adds to it the missing parts in a musically convincing way, in the hope that a close understanding and even embodying of how Reinecke shapes time and rhythm of the piece would naturally lead me to a dynamic rendition of it that would at least be in style with Reinecke.